Gretchen, it's great to be with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. When did you start creating systems for improving happiness? There's many ways to describe what you do, but you're basically this happiness engineer. So when did that become your
Oh, I
line of
like
work?
that phrase. My sister calls me a happiness bully, but I like happiness engineer. That's great. I was like in a crowded city bus like more than 10 years ago, and I was thinking, what do I want from life anyway? And I thought, well, I want to be happy. And I realized I didn't spend any time thinking about whether I was happy or if I could be happier or what it even meant to be happy. So I went out to the library, got a giant stack of books and started doing research. And really ever since that time, I've always been writing, and, my subject is human nature. But ever since kind of that day's epiphany, I really have been going deeper and deeper into happiness. How can we have the lives that we want to have? How can we change if we want to change? Because it's just such a vast, limitless subject with kind of so many different facets to it. It's inexhaustible.
Yeah, and you were headed down a very different path, right? You were starting to get into law, and I think, yeah. So
Well, I started my career in law, and I actually was clerking for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor at the Supreme Court when I got the idea for my first book, which was not my book about happiness. A lot of times people think that was my first book. But like many people, I worked for 10 years to become an overnight success. So I had written 3 books before I wrote The Happiness Project. And so I had made that pivot from law to writing. And then I was just finishing up a biography of John F. Kennedy when I got the idea to write The Happiness Project and got sort of pulled into this world of happiness, good habits, and human nature.
nice. Well, definitely something that's on a lot of people's mind these
Mm-hmm.
days. And how would you define happiness?
Well, like I said, I started my career in law, and we spent an entire semester arguing about the definition of contract. And happiness is even more elusive to describe. There are more than 15 academic definitions of happiness. People get caught up in it's bliss, it's satisfaction, it's peace, it's well-being, it's fulfillment, it's joy. And I think that for the lay person, it's good that it can mean all these different things to different people. Your concept of happiness doesn't have to be the same as my definition of happiness. If we were scientists studying it, we would have to agree, but you and I can have our own ideas. I think what's easier to understand is the idea of being happier. However I define happiness, do I think that by doing this or that, I can make myself happier, next week, next month, next year? Is this going to make me happier? That's usually very easy to see. That's very clear. Whereas the question of like, what is happiness? Am I happy? Like that becomes very tricky, and I think kind of frustrating to think about. So I think just think about, well, what would make you happier? Whatever you think happiness is.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's definitely a very personal subject.
Yes.
I do think that there's something recently, especially amongst the younger generations, myself included, this YOLO mentality where often happiness seems like it's getting primarily focused on as a short-term pursuit as opposed to kind of longer-term, more fulfilling value systems that might require some short-term sacrifice.
Well, that's a historical question. I haven't really thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably something that's in human nature all the time. And so the trade-off between because you can describe it in the negative. You can say, oh, I'm indulging in what I want to do now instead of making sacrifices for the future. Or you can say, oh, instead of enjoying the present and being in the moment, I'm constantly worried about the future. They're both. I think that there's just a tension within happiness. Like, how do you think about the present and the future? A completely future-oriented life wouldn't be a good life, and a completely present-oriented life wouldn't be a good life. So I think that's a tension that's always present. Whether it's more present now than it has been in the past, I kind of wonder. I think that like a lot of times we think things are sort of like new. And then, I read what people say about Facebook, and then I read Seneca from 2000 years ago, and he's writing exactly the same thing. I'm
Right.
like, maybe it's us, more than like the gizmos. Maybe it's in our heads. I kind of think in my own case, I'm often like, I think that's just me.
Yeah, a lot of these kind of self-help principles that are so popular now are often repackaged like Stoic quotes, and it's human nature really hasn't
Oh,
changed.
wait, yeah, not even Stoic. I mean, worldwide. I think
Yeah.
that the ideas related to happiness, they're too important to be original now. You know, these are the greatest minds in all of humanity have been studying these issues for thousands of years. So if somebody has some kind of shocking new insight, I'm like, it's probably not true, because people have been thinking about this all over the world for a very long time. They use a different vocabulary, and we can certainly learn from different, you know, different approaches. But yeah, I think the bones of the big ideas are definitely out there.
It strikes me that what might be novel about our current situation is that pleasure is getting more and more decoupled from kind of from what's good for us. I mean, there was a point in human history where we could have just done what felt good, and that would lead to, you know, food for ourselves and our loved ones. And now if we just purely are robotically following our you know, our dopamine responses and, you know, endlessly scrolling on the internet or whatever it is, it's easy to fall into all sorts of traps, it seems, that are these kind of pleasure traps that don't necessarily lead to happiness.
Well, that's true, but it's also true that I think that there's probably no time in history where there's been such an emphasis on executive function and self-mastery. And as somebody who studies self-mastery all the time, it's very striking to me how now the demands for self-mastery are extremely high, even for very young children. So in a way you could say, oh, well, we're like very like pleasure oriented and kind of instant gratification. On the other hand, there's a lot of emphasis on, okay, you can't say that, you can't act like that, you can't indulge that. You got to sit down and study this for 10 years. You got to, I mean, there's a lot put on us as well. So I think you're right. Like circumstances change and kind of the pressure points change, and it's worth thinking about how might that work for me or not work for me, and how do I manage it? Certainly our surroundings can prompt us to do things, and this is something with habits that you can often see. Like instead of like trying to make yourself like more self-disciplined, it's like don't have that stuff in your kitchen. Then you don't have to have any self-discipline at all. If you want ice cream, go out for an ice cream cone. You're not going to hop into your car at 10:30 at night and go to the ice cream store. Like it's just too much trouble. So don't have the ice cream in your fridge. Then you don't have to use self-control because there's no ice cream. So I think there is a lot where we can think about what in our environment is making it easy for us to do things that aren't good for us. Because you're right, there's a lot of things that, you know, one-click shopping. I mean, it's great, but it's not good for a lot of people too. We have to think about how these things influence us.
Yeah, that's the way it seems to me, is that the examined life has become like the stakes are higher. You know, the famous phrase, the unexamined life is not worth living. It seems like, you know, whether worthwhile or not, I mean, the unexamined life can lead to more damage now than ever because there are all these temptations. So having that control over ourselves, and maybe this leads us to habits, but putting those systems in place that allow us to live a fulfilling life has maybe become more important, or at least the stakes are, you know, potentially higher for really having that self-understanding.
Well, that's a historical argument. I'd have to think about that.
But yeah, where do habits play into all this?
What's interesting, when I started studying happiness, it was like, okay, what are the things that I would do to make myself happier? I used myself as my guinea pig in the happiness project. It was all like, okay, I'll try this, I'll try that, what works? And what I found as I was talking to people is that often people knew very well what would make them happier. Like they knew they would be happier if they exercised more, or if they went to sleep on time, or they stopped scrolling as much, or they ate healthier, or they spent more time with their friends, or they spent more time reading, or they spent time writing a novel in their free time, or practicing guitar, walking in nature. Like they had a good idea of what it was that would make them happier. But for whatever reason, it was not turning into action in their lives. And what I realized is that for many people, for a lot of the things that I just mentioned, these are not one-time things. They're things that we would like to make a habit of. I would like the habit of getting enough sleep. I would like the habit of working on my novel. I'd like the habit of spending time in nature. So the question then becomes, how do we make and break habits? And usually with the behavior, there's kind of the negative or the positive way that you can frame it. So people are like, is it hard? How do you make or break a habit? It's kind of the same thing, because I can eat healthier, which is making a habit, or I can quit sugar, which is breaking a habit. You know, for me, those are the same thing. Wouldn't be true for everyone. Not everybody wants to quit sugar, but that's what I did. And so that's what led me to habits, because I was like, well, if people want to be happier, they need to be consistent about doing certain behaviors. And that means that it's a challenge of habit formation, not really a challenge of happiness identification, because they know what they want to do. They're just not doing it. So then the question becomes, well, why aren't you doing it? And then how might you do a better job of sticking to the things you want to do?
A large part of our behaviors are these subconscious processes. And that, as you pointed out, is energetically way more efficient than if the brain had to constantly be making decisions in each moment about how to behave and act. And so, it strikes me that being on autopilot can be a very good thing, as long as that autopilot is headed in the right direction. And that in order to get it headed in the right direction, one of the first steps would be to really notice when it's going the wrong way, going in a way that we wouldn't want it to.
Absolutely. That's so true. It's such an important point to bring up, because habits are freeing and energizing. They can help us have the life that we want when they are good for us. But it's very easy for habits to lock in that are not good for us. Sometimes they're easier to lock in. And so I think you're absolutely right. We want to be very mindful when we might be drifting into a habit. So in the book Better Than Before, I talk about the 21 strategies of habit change. And these are all the strategies we can use to make or break habits. And sometimes people are like, 21 is too many, give me 3. But actually some work very well for some people and not for others. Some are available to us at certain times in our lives and not available to us at other times of our lives. So you want to have like a big choice, so you can pick the ones that work for you, have a big menu. But one of them is the clean slate. And that is when old habits are wiped away, new habits can rush in more easily. And this is why, for instance, when they look at people who've successfully quit smoking, most often, or very often, they're associated with moving where you live. Because when you're in your new kitchen, you don't have that association of like, oh, I sit down here and I have a cup of coffee while I sit here and I look out my back window and you don't have a back window, you don't have a table in your kitchen. So it's easier to do it. But one of the things that happens is, like, sometimes you might get a new job and the way you behave in the first 2 weeks of that job might kind of start you down a path for good habits or bad habits, depending on whether you mindfully set yourself up for it. So if I say to myself, look, I've got a new job, I've got this opportunity, this clean slate, I'm going to go to the gym every day this week, just so I get in the habit of going to the gym after work. So I'm used to that routine. I'm going to bring lunch from work every day. So I kind of get in the habit of like, what does it feel like to like go to the fridge and take out my like little paper bag? That's going to be what feels normal to me. And that's going to be kind of the rhythm that I'm establishing as I go into this new situation. If I don't think about the clean slate, I might say to myself, look, I'm starting a new job. I want to take it easy. I'm not going to go to the gym for the first couple of weeks because like everybody needs a little bit of a break, right? It's so tiring to start a new job. And like, I want to kind of explore the neighborhood. I'm going to go to some restaurants. I'm not going to, later on, I'll bring lunch from home. But like right now, I'm not going to do that, right? Well, 2 weeks from now, what does an ordinary day seem like to me? Well, it's going to feel like whatever I've been doing so far. So if I, as you say, if I mindfully and intentionally set up good habits, it's going to be a lot easier for me to like slip into that pattern. Whereas if I kind of thoughtlessly put hurdles in my way, well, I'm going to have to overcome those hurdles to put into place the healthier habits that I said that I wanted. I was kind of looking for an excuse to give myself a little bit of a break, whereas I would have been much better off like really holding myself to it to help put the pattern into place for the habits that I wanted to follow for the long term.
What's the Four Tendencies framework? You mentioned it earlier, and I forget what you said you were, but what are those four tendencies?
Yes. So this is a really helpful thing to know if you're trying to figure out yourself or other people, if you're trying to set up habits effectively. And I'm going to describe it right now. And most people know what they are right away. They know what they are. They know their family members. They know their colleagues. They know the Game of Thrones characters. But if you want to take a quiz, there's a quiz at quiz.gretchenrubin.com. 3 million people have taken this quiz. It's free. It's quick. And it will give you like a little report. You know, we all like to take a quiz. So it's fun to take the quiz. But you don't. Here, I'll just explain it. It's very obvious once you know them. So it sounds very boring, but what this looks at is something that's actually very juicy and significant, which is how you respond to expectations. And we all respond to 2 kinds of expectations. Outer expectations, which is like a work deadline or request from a friend. And then there are inner expectations, like my own desire to keep a New Year's resolution, my own desire to get back into meditation. And depending on how you respond to outer and inner expectations in combination, that's what makes you an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. So upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations. They meet the work deadline. They keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. They want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. So their motto is, discipline is my freedom. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. They resist anything arbitrary, ineffective, unjustified. They always need to know why. So if something will meet their inner standard, they will do it, no problem. If it fails their inner standard, they will push back. So their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. And I got my first insight into this tendency when a friend said to me, I know I'm happier when I exercise. And when I was in high school, I was on the track team and I never missed track practice. So why can't I go running now? Well, when she had a team and a coach waiting for her, she had no trouble showing up. But when she was trying to go on her own, it was a struggle. And so the key for obligers is outer accountability. If you want to read more, join a book group. If you want to exercise more, work out with a friend, work out with a trainer, raise money for a charity, think of your duty to be a role model. Outer accountability will allow you to meet inner expectations. So their motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then finally, rebels. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, but if you ask or tell them to do something, they are very likely to resist. And typically they don't tell themselves what to do. Like they don't sign up for the 10 a.m. spin class on Saturday morning because they think, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Saturday. And just the idea that someone's expecting me to show up is going to annoy me. And so their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So those are the 4 tendencies.
Well, I'll take your quiz, but I think I'm a questioner.
Okay.
That description. So
okay.
That last category, are they hopeless? Like, what would you suggest for the rebels who are, it sounds like they're probably the less likely category of those 4 to form a habit.
Well, that's very interesting because actually rebels often dislike even the idea of habits. Like they don't like the idea of being chained. But then sometimes they do because they might see it as a challenge, or they want to, they're like, you think that I can't run every single day for 360? You think I can't run the marathon in 2020? You know, watch me. So they do it. But you're right. I mean, the rebel tendency is the most different from the other 3. It's the smallest tendency in terms of, number of people in the population. It's the smallest number of people. It's the largest section of my book because it is kind of the most different and kind of you have to really like take it into account. So if a rebel wants to, let's not even call it a habit because that often they don't like that word. But let's say a rebel wants to get something done for themselves. They have an aim for themselves. There's a couple different things. One is a challenge, like I'll show you, or people think I can't do this, but watch me. That often is very exciting to rebels. Another is identity. I'm exercising, not because the doctor told me to, not because you told me to, not because I said I would, not because I signed up for that class, but because I'm an athlete. I've always been an athlete. I love to use my body. And I've kind of gotten away from that in recent years, but I'm getting really back into that now because I'm an athlete, or I'm an artist. I'm a dog lover. I'm an environmentalist. I'm creative. I want to put my work out into the world. I want to show people what I've got. That's who I am, because for rebels, identity is a very, very important value. Another very important value for them is choice and freedom. And so one thing you can do with yourself as a rebel, or if you're dealing with a rebel, is information, consequences, choice. You give them the information that they need, you tell them the consequences of their action or inaction, and then you step back and let them decide what to do. So if I was a doctor and you come in and you have this operation, I could say, hey, look, you've had this operation and we know the outcomes. We've studied the outcomes for a long time. And the people who do their physical therapy, well, they're pain-free, they're off medication, they're traveling, they're back at work, they don't need any help getting dressed or going to the bathroom or showering, any of that. They're going about their business. They're doing great. The people who don't do their physical therapy, well, we see a different result. They're on pain medication, they're not traveling, they're uncomfortable, they're reliant on other people for their basic, functions. Like, they're kind of limited. So I got these pamphlets on physical therapy if you want them. It's up to you to decide what to do. But if I nudge you, if I remind you, if I insist, if I say, this is what you have to do, then I might ignite that spirit of resistance and make the rebel feel like saying to me, you can't tell me what to do. Because that's true. I can't tell you what to do. With this is the great truth that I have learned from rebels. No one can tell anybody else what to do.
Mm.
But so for Rebel, you want to remind them, this is what you want to do. This is what you want. This is what you choose. This works for you. Because once they decide it's what they want, well, then they can do anything.
Mm. That's cool. I'm just thinking about this like it immediately makes sense. I mean, I can fit myself and others that I know into these frameworks. It seems like you would almost with the Rebel want to make it part of their identity.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, if possible, or you would want to show how something fit into their identity, or how something fit into something that they wanted to do. And that, I mean, one of the most beautiful stories I ever heard, because people who are the parents of rebels, who are not rebels themselves, often struggle. It's challenging because it's a very different perspective. Especially if you don't know the vocabulary. And this woman who was an upholder, so I have a podcast, the Happier Podcast, and this woman had sent in a question saying, I have this little girl, she's 5 years old, she's a rebel. How do I make her tell her that there's some things you just have to do, like you just have to wash your hands after you use the potty. And I was like, hey, listen, you don't have to wash your hands after you use the potty, and your little girl has figured that out. You're going to have to convince her to do it for her own reasons, because you can't stand over her for the next 45 years making sure she washes her hands, because she doesn't have to. That's just the fact. So we talked about like how you might talk it through with a 5-year-old child about why this would be the thing to do. But what was interesting is she emailed me later, and she said how she had really thought about the rebel tendency and trying to understand kind of the world from her daughter's perspective. And this was, I thought, was a very moving story. So this mother and daughter had gone to see the mother's own grandmother, so a very elderly woman who had just come out of the hospital, very, very frail. And her daughter, the 5-year-old, was running around being very wild. And the mother said, I realized I couldn't say to my daughter, you have to stop running. I'm telling you, you have to slow down, because I can't make her stop. And so I said to her, oh, great grandma is so weak. She is so frail. It would be so terrible if she fell again and had to go back to the hospital. She needs her protectors. Can you be her protector? And the little girl said, yes, I will be one of her protectors. And then instantly quieted down. She was like standing next to her great grandmother, like being very tender and ginger with her, because it was her identity. She was choosing to be a protector. So, and I thought, well, what a beautiful example of how by understanding the perspective of someone else, you can reach them effectively. Because it'd be very easy as that mother to be like, you're wild, you're inconsiderate, you don't care about anybody else, you can't control yourself, right? But that wasn't what was going on. And by understanding how to frame it in a way that the little girl could kind of buy into, she was able to reach her and to help her see like how to change her behavior for the situation. And so I think a lot of times there's all this misunderstanding and conflict and friction, because we speak from our own tendency instead of trying to understand like how to reach people more effectively, thinking about their tendency and how they see the world.
Mm. Yeah, I really like this personalized psychological approach, and makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I was younger, I really needed to know the why in order to commit. I wasn't going to not eat another cookie just because I was told. It was, understanding the kind of sugar spike and why that might not be healthy and all that. So,
but see, and I've heard all sorts of stories from questioners. I was told I asked too many questions, or like a lot of times I think if one grown-up had spent 10 minutes explaining something, the questioner would have been like, okay, I get it, I'm on board. But no one says that. They say, I'm the teacher. 4th graders always have to do it because I say so. And the questioner's like, well, that's totally illegitimate, so I'm not on board.
Yeah, as they should almost.
Yes!
I almost feel like you want someone who's questioning those things.
But see, this is yes, you're exactly right. And this is the value of questioners for all of us. All of the tendencies have tremendous strengths. And we need a diversity of, if you've got a team or whatever, you want a diversity of tendencies because everybody brings a different strength. And like, I'm married to a questioner. It's enormously valuable to me because as an upholder, I too readily will say yes. I too readily execute. I'm just good at executing. I'll just do. So I think I ask my husband, or I think to myself, what would he say? I'm like, do you think I should do this? And he's always like, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, why would I? Questioners are the ones that save us all from like wasting our time or energy or money. And if you get questioners together, what they say is like, why are other people these lemmings that just go along with anything? Like, why are we listening to this person? Like, why are we switching to that software? It's really good for all of us. It protects all of us. It's really helpful. But, and maybe you've run into this, questioners can sometimes seem disrespectful or obstructionists or not team players. Sometimes people really get their nose out of joint with questioners. They feel like they feel defensive, they feel attacked. And so questioners need to learn to ask questions in ways that don't make other people feel attacked.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And it makes sense why, I mean, I keep going back to historical examples. This is kind of how I frame things, like in terms of evolutionary psychology, but it makes sense that you would want in a tribe, you would want some people who are going along with the rules, but you'd also want some people who are kind of questioning how things are done and trying to like always improve on how things are done. So I guess there's a place for all these different personality types.
Absolutely. And I do think that they're genetically hardwired. And I think it's because nature has decided that we need all of it. It's funny though, because I remember I got a letter from somebody who was married to a rebel. She was very exasperated with her spouse. And she said, I understand why this would be helpful in the French resistance, but we're not in the French resistance now. I was like, right. Because sometimes you're like, oh, the rebel, like what I need is a rebel right now to like get us through this. But it's like, sometimes it's like, it's a little bit annoying that every time you ask or tell somebody to do something, they push back.
So what about in terms of encouraging ourselves to create habits? I mean, let's say, as a concrete example, let's say I'm trying to create a meditation habit. I know I've read the literature. I know it's healthy. I know it's going to help me, but I just can't bring myself to formulate the habit. Like, what would be some tips you would give for someone who's trying to create a habit like that?
Well, so let's skip over upholder, because upholder, that's the kind of thing upholders are good at. So an upholder would just say, I'm going to do it at 8 a.m. every day, and they would do it, and that's pretty easy. So that's the kind of thing where it's handy to be an upholder. So when a questioner wants to form a habit, but is somehow having trouble forming the habit, what the problem is the why. Somehow at some level, that questioner has not completely accepted that they should do this. Okay. And a lot of times, questioners can have analysis paralysis when they want more and more and more information. So maybe I've decided that I want to meditate, but I'm like, but should I do walking meditation or loving kindness meditation? Or maybe I should do transcendental meditation. Maybe I should do guided meditation, but maybe that's kind of cheating. And maybe I should do it for 5 minutes, but maybe I should do it for 20 minutes. Maybe I should do it at night. No, I think I should do it in the morning. It's like, the whys have not been answered. And so the habit cannot follow because the whys have not been answered. So if you're a questioner and you're not able to execute on a habit that you feel committed to, push yourself. Have I really, really, really achieved clarity and justification for the path that I am on? Now, one thing that questioners can always say is, look, it's not clear what the right answer is. I'm going to try something. I'm going to experiment. And from the experiment, I will learn and I will iterate. A lot of times questioners like to kind of self-hack or experiment. And so sometimes it's more efficient. Efficiency is a high value for questioners, to start and try something rather than to spin out doing more and more and more research to try to find the right answer. It's better. Try walking meditation. If it doesn't work, then we're going to go to loving kindness meditation. But let's start somewhere. That often will appeal to questioners because it's that experiment. Obliger, it's outer accountability. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is not self-care. It is not motivation. It is not priorities. It is not putting yourself first. It is not getting, it's about outer accountability. So maybe you and I make a deal. I love a massage. You love a massage. If you meditate for 30 days in a row, I get a massage. If you meditate for 30 days in a row, I get a massage. So you'd let yourself down, but you're not going to let me down because I don't get my massage if you don't do your meditation. Or maybe I work with a meditation coach, or maybe I text a friend every day. After he meditates, he texts me. After I meditate, I text him. So I have a feeling of checking in. I have this app, the Better app. It's like a free app. And a lot of times people use it to create accountability groups. They don't even have to be doing the same thing. It's just like we're each holding each other accountable. And I know that if I don't do it, you're going to kind of feel like you're off the hook too. So I have to keep my habit in order for you to feel like, okay, we're all doing this. I might think of my duty to be a role model for someone else. I want to show somebody what I think a healthy life looks like, or I want to show what it looks like to keep promises to yourself. Or maybe I want my husband to meditate. So I'm like, hey, let's both meditate together. So now I have to do it because I want him to meditate. So now I have to do it too. There are a million ways to create outer accountability once you know that that is what you need. Sometimes obligers act like this is kind of a sign of weakness. Obliger is the biggest tendency for both men and women. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. This is extremely common. It is not a sign of weakness. It's just something that some people need. And it's not hard to get. There's a million ways to get it. So get the outer accountability and you will be able to form the habit far more easily. For rebel, you said it. It's identity. This is who I am. This is what I want. This is the kind of person I am. This is what I choose. Now, often rebels will choose to do something in a very unusual way. Like maybe they're going to do an unusual kind of meditation that you and I have never heard of before. Or maybe they're going to do it in a really extreme, interesting way. They're going to get up at 4 a.m. and do it. because everybody's like, wow, you meditate at 4 a.m. That's crazy. They like that. And sometimes they just do it because they want to. They're like, this is what works for me. This is what I need. I don't really care what you think or what other people say. This is what I do. They might invent their own way to do it. With Rebel, it's just like, this is what you want. And also they might not want to commit to doing it at a certain time of day. Often Rebels like to do things spontaneously. They don't like the idea of having something on their calendar. So they might just say like, I meditate when I feel like it. Sometimes I feel like I need it. Sometimes I don't. Like, I'm not going to get locked into a schedule. To me as an upholder, I'm like, how can you live like that? What does that even mean to meditate when you feel like it? But to a rebel, that feels right. And so sometimes I think we try to force people into what we think would work. Like an obliger's like, oh, you need to have accountability. It's like, well, a lot of people don't need accountability. And for a rebel, it might actually be counterproductive. They don't like somebody looking over their shoulder and telling them what to do. So sometimes we might recommend courses of action to people because they would work for us. So they feel right to us. They wouldn't work for someone else. So you need to think about what kind of person you are so you can set things up in the way that's going to allow you to keep that habit most successfully.
Is there a point at which the habit will become automated? I know that probably varies person to person, but like how long would someone expect to keep with that activity before it starts to become automated?
For an obliger, I would say they would always need outer accountability. I would not tell an obliger that they should ever count on not having outer accountability. That's just what obligers need. So it's not like you transcend it or you work your way through it. It's just it's just a circumstance that you need in order to succeed, right. Which is not that big a deal. It's just the way things are. And I've heard from obligers over and over again where they're like, oh, I don't need it anymore, and then 2 weeks later the habit is gone as if it never was. That's just the way that it is. And habits really vary. They vary much according to the person. They vary much according to convenience. Habits that are convenient to keep are much easier to keep. How pleasant they are, how fun they are. I assure you, if you have a donut on your way to work 3 days in a row, that habit will lock in with iron force, and it will be on your mind for years. Right. Another habit, it might always need. I mean, one of the things that's nice about having the 21 strategies is you can see ways that you can reinforce a habit so that you keep a structure that's holding it in place so that it always has support. I think with complex, challenging habits, you always want to be thinking about supporting the habit. You don't want to totally take it for granted because most things are not as simple as brushing your teeth or putting on a seatbelt.
I just think creating these systems is so important, and yet it's something that we really have to kind of force ourselves to do. I mean, it's not a natural thing to examine our lives in this way, and yet in a lot of ways we are just the product of our habits, whether that's habitual thoughts or habitual actions, and they compound over time. So it's just 100%. As someone's investing little money today, it doesn't look like a lot tomorrow, but then they wake up and their retirement account could be massive if they've invested in the right places. And it seems that's the same thing with habits. It really is worthwhile to sit down and really put the right systems in place with compounding effects.
Right. I mean, whatever percentage of our life is made up by habits, maybe 40% or whatever number, it's a lot. And so if we have habits that work for us, it's just going to be a lot easier to be happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative. And if we have habits that don't work for us, that's just going to be much more challenging. I think you're exactly right. It over the long term, it matters tremendously. What we do most days matters more than what we do once in a while. And the habits are the things that we do most days. And those really matter.
Well, again, I love how personalized this approach is. And it just makes so much sense when I'm thinking about myself and also others around me and observing their behaviors. So I'm excited to take your quiz. There's one more area of kind of lifestyle design that I was hoping you cothere riff on, which is clutter. How this affects our well-being.
Well, again, there's differences among people, and I will say there is a small number of people who are truly clutter blind. I have a podcast, the Happier Podcast, and my sister Elizabeth is clutter blind. And for clutter blind people, they don't see it. It does not bother them. They simply do not notice. My sister would not close a kitchen cabinet door in her life if she didn't live with other people. But for most people, it is true that outer order contributes to inner calm, probably more than it should. There is just over and over, I feel this way. People tell me they feel the same way, that, you clean off your desk and you just feel so energized and so focused. a friend of mine said, I finally cleaned out my fridge and now I know I can switch careers. And I thought, wow, I know exactly how that feels. So I think for a lot of us, clearing clutter really does free up our mind and our energy.
Yeah, we just did a big house cleaning where I am, and it's incredible how it seems like you drop a bunch of mental baggage too.
Yes,
You
it's
look at
so,
less.
yes. So my favorite story is when the quarantine began, somebody I knew, her 3 adult sons were coming home to be safer at home. So she had the presence of mind to get a dumpster when it all started. And so she spent 10 weeks using her sons to, like, she would clean out every closet, every room, the basement, the garage, the attic, running stuff out to the dumpster, or like making piles of things to give away when they could give them away again. And so, and it is, she said, it was just amazing how great you feel. And then the elbow room that you have and kind of the mental clarity that you have when you clean out.
Yeah, yeah, it feels good. I know I've also read too that a cluttered desk could be more conducive to creative work, while a neat desk could be more conducive to efficient work. So I know that'll be personalized too. But
Well, I mean, because I think some people are simplicity lovers and some people are abundance lovers. And I just think that there's a mistake in saying there's a best way or there's a right way or there's the creative way or whatever.
yeah,
Different people thrive in different environments. And so if you're the boss, you shouldn't march around saying a cluttered desk means a cluttered mind. So everybody has to have a clean desk, because maybe you want a clean desk. I want a clean desk, but other people do better in a different environment. And so I do think that there's this fallacy of thinking that there's one best way. And like, oh, if we have a study that shows this, then that must be true for everyone.
yeah,
It just, look around you. That's just not the case. People thrive in very different environments. And so I think for each of us, it's figuring out, how do I do my best work? And if I have to be with other people, how do we arrive in a solution that works for all of us as best we can, rather than trying to convince each other, I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm wrong.
right,
We can both be right.
right. Know thyself.
Yes.
Well, there's a few rapid fire questions I have here for you. Are you ready for the
Excellent.
rapid fire section?
I am.
All right, your top tip for people to be happier.
Relationships. Ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree it's about relationships. So anything you do to deepen or broaden your relationships is going to make you happier.
Favorite book.
Oh, I can't say. I love, love, love to read. I have 1,000 favorite books. I couldn't possibly choose. I would be here
All right,
all day
most
listing
gifted
hundreds.
book.
Oh, my most gifted book is called A Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander, which is this brilliant, strange book, which I highly recommend.
What's it about?
He's an architect, and he looks at spaces all over the world, but instead of saying like, oh, this is, the Victorian, Edwardian style, or your chandelier should be 30 inches off your dining room table, he identifies patterns, the pattern language, that are appealing to people. So it's things like cascade of roofs, garden overlooking life, staircase as stage, light on two sides. And so it just made ceilings at different heights, child cave, sleeping to the east, Zen view. There's like, and then he'll show a picture of like a 17th century Finnish farmhouse and then like a 1980s, ranch house. And you're like, oh my gosh, I love them both, because they both have a cascade of roofs or whatever. So it's showing how he thinks that there's sort of these deep elements of human nature that attract us to certain kind of architectural patterns. It's fascinating.
That sounds really cool.
It's really
I
good.
do think there's so much psychology in architecture.
Yes. Well, you would love Christopher Alexander. That's all he writes about.
Historical figure you'd like to have dinner with.
Well, I wrote a biography of Winston Churchill, so I would love to meet Winston Churchill. Saint Therese of Lisieux is my spiritual master, even though I'm not Catholic, so I'd like to meet Saint Therese of Lisieux. Samuel Johnson is probably my biggest influence right now, or maybe George Orwell. I would like to have dinner with them. So those are Virginia Woolf. I love Virginia Woolf. That's some. Yeah.
All right, you get a dinner party.
I'll have a dinner party with all of them. Yes. That would be one weird dinner party. Nobody would say a word to each other. That's a weird group of people. That's the variety of human nature right there.
Yeah. Best personal habit that you've created, or favorite habit that you have, I guess.
Probably working every day. I just write every day, and that's probably my favorite habit. It always keeps me connected to my work, and it's my playground too. It's my playground and my sandbox. So I always have something to do. That's fun.
Do you ever feel like you have writer's block or anything like that, or does it come easy to you?
It doesn't always come easily, but I just write around it. So the way some people, when they write a book, they start at the beginning and they go to the end, and kind of when they reach the end, they're done. But I kind of write everything all at once. So if I'm stuck in one place, I'll work on something else. And then usually by the time I come back to the thing that I was stuck on, I have a different perspective on it. So I kind of have ways to work so that I don't get stuck. And then I have like a bazillion note-taking. I have a lot of like projects that need to be fed all the time, so I can always work on those, which is kind of easy and fun. If my main project is giving me trouble.
All right, last one of these is you get a 15-second commercial that goes out to the whole world. What would you say? No pressure.
Wear your mask.
Okay. 3-second commercial.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. Right on. Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it was so fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me.